Welcome to Lone Star Showdown Week here on the 40 Acres Football Podcast. Texas taking on Texas A&M, the matchup that everyone's been waiting for. I'm Justin Goosman, as always, joined with Robert and Joe this week. We got a lot to talk about. The first matchup between Texas and Texas A&M in 13 years, and it's rivalry week. And something always happens in rivalry week that you don't expect to happen. So let's get right into it. And we normally start with discussing the college football playoff poll from the week that it's released. This week we're recording on Tuesday, so we're not going to have the results from the latest college football playoff poll. Instead, we're going to give you our locks for who we think have officially locked up a spot in the college football playoff. Who wants to get us started? Joe, Robert?
Yeah, I mean this one's no question. But Georgia, they are win or lose to Georgia Tech. It's a non-conference game, so it doesn't matter with the SEC standings. Georgia,
Ah, who
Georgia is
knows?
already going. You think so? You don't think that? You
Who
think
knows? Who knows? We'll
when you
see.
bring it into okay?
They'll probably win that game. Yeah, I
Maybe I
mean
jumped
that's
maybe I jumped off to a hot start, but I just think that they're already a lock. They have two losses now. I
yeah.
guess if they lose the SEC championship, they could miss it. But with that being said, my lock is going to be the team we cover the most, the Texas Longhorns, because I feel like if they lose to Texas A&M, they don't go to the SEC championship, and they I think they earn a 9 through 12 seed, 9 through 12 seed. So they lose to A&M. If that happens, they don't even risk losing a third game in the SEC championship because they don't even make it. My lock is Texas.
That's a good answer. Uh I feel like I guess the lock has to be Oregon, right? Are we talking about like really like hard
Yeah.
locks or like
Yeah. I mean, if you got more than like if you could list like all your locks, I mean, Oregon's definitely in there.
I would say Texas for sure to join on with Robert, but I would say Oregon is definitely the most like secure lock because last year you had to factor, of course, in the 14 playoff, if they could win the Pac-12 championship and beat Oregon after losing, beat Washington after losing to Washington, um, in Seattle a few weeks prior, and they couldn't do it in Las Vegas again. And if they had done that, they would have probably found a way to sneak in there, maybe. But this year, I mean, they're still undefeated. They've still beaten Ohio State in a very big game in Autzen Stadium. I think they're the most secure, and surprisingly, they're not like a 99% lock according to the college football playoff markings. I think they're just above like 90%, I believe, not by too much. But do you think they'd really be like somewhere around 97, 98% for a team of their stature where even if they were to lose this next game to Washington in a rivalry game, which I don't think they will, I mean, this game is in Autzen Stadium. It's going to be booming, trying to secure an undefeated season en route to an already clinched berth into the Pac-12 championship, excuse me, the Big Ten championship, with another matchup against the Ohio State Buckeyes, likely, unless some magic happens in the big game between Michigan and Ohio State. But I really think those two teams are going to play there in the Big Ten championship. And so, with that being said, I think Oregon is number one, and then I'd say maybe Texas number two, possibly.
I got a few locks. I got four or five. I think Oregon, Ohio State, Texas are all definitive locks. I don't think any of them miss the playoff, regardless of what happens the next 2 weeks. I think Penn State is a lock. I think Indiana is also a lock. And then Georgia is where I start to get a little iffy because if they go and lose to Georgia Tech, which I think could 100% happen, Georgia has not looked unbeatable, and Georgia Tech has a formidable team this year. In a big rivalry game where Georgia Tech has shocked the Bulldogs a few times that I can remember. Most recently, the Harrison Butker 52-yarder to knock down the Nick Chubb led Georgia Bulldogs in Athens at that. And so I think Georgia could go lose to Georgia Tech and then lose the SEC championship. And I think that would be a really tough scenario for them to get into the college football playoff if that does happen. Um, but like y'all said, Oregon for sure. Ohio State, I think they're 100% in. I think Texas is in. I think Penn State is in. And I think Indiana is in because there's no way that they're going to lose to who do they play next week? Purdue?
Purdue.
Yeah, they're not losing to Purdue. And then they likely won't get into the Big Ten championship, so they don't risk a second loss as well. So I think all those teams are locks, and I think Georgia is in there with a win against Georgia Tech, and I think they will beat Georgia Tech, but I'm not ready to say they're a lock 100% quite yet. I think Miami is probably in, but they got to finish the season strong. They got to go and win the ACC. And that's said for a few of those ACC teams. So those are my locks right off the bat. I think a couple teams could play their way in this weekend. I think a couple teams could play their way out as well.
If Michigan, this is pertaining to Ohio State. If Ohio State gets upset by Michigan for another loss in the Ryan Day era, and Indiana beats Purdue, which means Indiana will head to the Big Ten championship, right? And
Mhm.
Ohio State would now have a chance to play for a conference championship. Would Ohio State be left out, do you
I
think?
don't I don't think so,
Because that's an unranked Michigan they would lose to.
but they still have two top 10 wins on the season with Penn State and Indiana. Regardless of how you feel about Penn State and Indiana, and their strength of schedules, I still think those wins do enough for them, even with a loss to Michigan, that they'd be in.
When it's all said and done, maybe not all these teams are going to be locks, but I do see it being very likely where Indiana, Penn State, Ohio State, and Oregon all go to the playoffs.
Yeah, I
Not
agree.
all of them are going to be locks. Like I said, I don't think Penn State's a lock. Depending on what happens in these next 2 weeks, whoever goes to the Big Ten championship, I mean, we could have Ohio State losing to Michigan. It probably won't happen, but it's the biggest rivalry in college football. Anything could happen. But with that being said, like I do see it's very likely where all four of these teams go to the playoffs, you know.
Yeah, for sure.
Someone's heart's gonna get broken. I got a feeling some controversy is coming. Something's happening. Not as
Something's
much as probably
definitely gonna
Florida State
happen.
last year, but I feel like something else is gonna happen. And people are gonna be like, oh, what happened to the 14 team playoff that's gonna come in a few years? And maybe that should hurry up and come right behind this 12-team playoff.
I
Who
think
knows?
I'll say this. I think before another expanded playoff, I think they get rid of the bet top four ranked conference championships getting a bye. I think they'll completely get rid of that and say they all get an auto bid, but wherever you're ranked, you play.
See, that is where I think the playoff format would be perfect. I think the five best conference champions need to be in the playoffs. They don't necessarily need to have a bye.
Agreed.
But like, if you win the conference championship, though, how can you like go on the road after, you know? Like, if you were to think about the NFL. Like that would be a completely different league then, right? There'd be so many different games that would not happen without a conference champion or a division winner hosting a game, right?
I just feel like college football is there's just room for so much more chaos and the distribution of talent amongst the entire league is so different. What I mean by that is, you have, I'm gonna try to say this. I'm gonna try to say this to where it makes sense because I feel like it's very complex in my head. I don't know. I just feel like in the NFL, you win your division by playing a limited number of teams, not just the teams in your division, but a handful of the teams outside your division. And depending on that record, you win your division. Same thing goes with conferences, but I just feel like just because you win, you're not comparing a team that has a home field advantage in the NFC or the AFC. They get a home field advantage relative to those teams in that side of the league. Whereas teams who get a home field advantage in college football, it's relative to 133 other FBS teams. If that makes any sense whatsoever. Did that?
That's a fair point. I just kind of relative to your point, I wish that they didn't all decide to go divisionless after they made these ginormous leagues. Because now it makes more sense to go divisionless, right?
Ex
I mean,
yeah,
to
with
separate divisions,
division
excuse
for
me.
sure.
Yeah. Well, because now you have these 18 team leagues, some 16 team leagues where you have all these big conferences and everybody's not gonna play each other. If they had it separated to like East and West like they did for the SEC classically, or North and South like they did for the Big Ten, even the Big 12 a decade ago when they had a North and South division, people don't even remember that anymore. That's been so long ago they got rid of that. But it's just insane to me to think that they got rid of these divisions and you're not even going to play like a good amount of the league, and not like all of the league still, but it's not like a few good teams that you might not even have a chance to play. And now you have situations like Texas where people are going to complain that you're not playing a good amount of teams. Well, if you made a division where you play these same teams every single year, there's no escaping, that kind of combo. So I think they really
Exactly.
dropped the ball there where you're making these big old super conferences.
Well,
And
also, take a scenario like the Big Ten. I feel like it's not going to happen this year, but any other year where you have Ohio State and Michigan both being very good. Take the past 3 years, and here you have this arguably the biggest rivalry in all of college football, and these two teams finally coming together at the last week of the regular season to play, and then they play. Someone wins. There's no divisions in the Big Ten. They turn around and they play each other the next week in a neutral site for the Big Ten championship. And then both those teams still go to the playoffs and they play each other a third time. Like this, getting rid of the divisions opens up scenarios for two great rivals to play each other three times. And the one time of the season where it's actually like passions run the deepest and energy is highest is that regular season matchup. But when you have it in a scenario where they can play three times, what significance would that Ohio State Michigan game played at the very last game of the season? What would that have compared to when they played in the Big Ten championship or the college football playoffs? Like what significance does that regular season home game serve at that point, unlike all the other seasons when it was like the biggest game ever?
And I see why they did it too, because it was so top heavy, especially in the Big Ten East, I believe. Yeah, they had Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State and Michigan State, while the West had the Cupcakes in Nebraska
Northwestern.
and Purdue and Northwestern. So it's like if you're in the Big Ten West, man, you can have like a free ride just to get your tail kicked in Indianapolis. While these teams on the right are playing with all these big old recruiting classes with clearly a better pool of talent, better
Yeah.
program history, more championships. I can see why they went divisionless, but at this point, man, like they might have to bring it back some way. It might not be the next year, the next coming years, but
They have
these conferences
eventually
are
they do.
they're way too big. These conferences are way too big. Maybe they can reshuffle the divisions. Who knows?
Yeah, that's my thing. Like you can have interconference realignment. Like you can move teams around and maybe you even come up with something like, hey, every 3 years we're gonna realign these conferences again um inside of and make different divisions, right? And
Like
so
high school football.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I mean, at this point, we've created such a mess in college football where you have 18 team conferences and these massive big conferences where like Indiana, yeah, they're going to get into the playoff most likely as long as they don't drop an egg versus Purdue. The only good team they played was Ohio State, and the rest of the teams they played were not that great. And I know I'm talking as a student from Texas. Who have we played other than Georgia, really? Not a whole lot of talent. Obviously, Texas will go play A&M this weekend, but it's the same thing there. And yeah, I do think you have a point there where it's like we need some sort of divisions to at least move the talent around where teams aren't getting away with playing the weakest opponents year in and year out.
Also, people always talk about there's always going to be one conference that's going to get the short end of the stick. I mean, this past year and a half, it's been the Pac-12 with all those teams going to the Big 12, going to the Big 10, and then you had a couple of them, Cal and Stanford, going to the ACC. Well, they're like, oh, the Pac-12 is going to be gone, and then now you see the Pac-12 taking teams from the Mountain West to a little bit to revive itself a little bit. Well, and then people are like, oh, well, all is good in the world. Once again, the Pac-12 will be back. Well, what about the Mountain West? What are they going to do? I feel like there's always going to be no matter how you try to fix it, there's always going to be one conference kind of getting the short end of the stick. Now, I know that they're adding new teams to the FBS every year, but it's just about one or two, and it's not like it's each conference is going to be rebuilt quickly.
Yeah, 100%. Let's let's move over to some talk about the game of the week, the game of the year, arguably the game of the decade since it hasn't been played in over a decade. Heading to College Station into a raucous environment, arguably the best in all of college football. Give me your initial impressions. What do you feel? Are there anxieties going into this game? Because I know for me, there definitely are. I do not feel confident in the pre-snap penalties, the pre-snap adjustments. I don't feel confident in Quinn's health. Give me y'all's assessment before I go into mine.
Well, I'm playing it cool now, but I feel like once they start playing Mo Bamba, it might start I might start getting to be a nervous wreck. But there's going to be a lot of emotion here, and it's a big time game that hasn't happened in over a decade. No more Twitter fingers, no more hypotheticals, no more hate watching. Well, there will be hate watching, like from the side, but at least from like a conference perspective, you're not going to be checking on the SEC games while you're in the Big 12 and vice versa. You're in the same conference now. You're going to play each other on a yearly basis, just like old times. So, with that being said, this is going to be one entertaining game. I can't wait to see it. As far as Texas is concerned, I don't know if I'm really worried too much for them. I'm really not. This team has not lost a true road game since October of 2022. And if you remember that game, that did not go well for Quid Ewers. One of his worst games ever. The wind was picking up in Boone Pickens Stadium in Oklahoma State. He just could not throw a thing on target that whole entire game. Bijan had a great game. Receivers had a great game, but in that second half, Oklahoma State just feasted on him. He could not really complete a good pass as everything was just going wayward. I don't think, barring any crazy weather, there should be like anything unusual from Quinn Ewers that we haven't seen already this season. He's been a little spotty, but this crowd will definitely be influencing Texas A&M more than usual. And for any Texas fans that are thinking, just because this A&M team lost to Auburn, that they're going to come in slow and they're gonna not going to come in with something to play for, they have everything to play for. Of course, it's going to be their first SEC championship berth that they could potentially clinch in this game. So they still have a lot to play for as well. And if they were to win that game, if they were to clinch, have a chance to win a college football playoff berth and get in as one of the auto bids, winning the championship game. So they have everything to play for as well. And I do think that it means a lot that finally having this game back, you can really have a chance to embrace this game like other generations from a fan perspective. Because I will say, I grew up in North Texas. I knew way more OU fans. This is OU territory, by the way. This is not Texas territory. I didn't grow up around many Texas fans. I grew up around a lot of OU fans in particular. So that rivalry has always meant more to me. So for me, it's cool to see this game live instead of just relying on the same old highlights, the same old LHN replay of Justin Tucker hitting the game winner. But it'll be good for the fans, and I can't wait to see it. It should be a great one.
I think from A&M's perspective, they're going to get Texas at the best time possible. Texas is 4-0 since the Georgia game, but they definitely don't look as crisp as they did against Michigan. They don't look as crisp as they did against Oklahoma State in the Big 12 championship last year, or when they had Xavier Worthy and Adonai Mitchell. They look vulnerable. I'm going to be honest about Texas. They look vulnerable right now, and A&M's getting them at the best time possible. With that being said, I know that A&M's offense isn't as efficient in scoring, which is good for Texas's defense. But I think two things right now. I think A&M They definitely still have something to play for, like you said, Joe. They got a berth to the SEC championship on the line, and so they're going to be playing up for that. But I don't think they're going to be caring about that. I think they're going to be caring about, can we just beat the brakes off of Texas right now? With Texas, I think that they go in a little bit vulnerable, still the better team, but I just think it's going to be A&M playing up, and Texas is right here. I think A&M is just going to kind of meet them in the middle a little bit when Texas has the chance to play to the best of their ability, they're much better than A&M. But I don't think they will. I think Texas will win the game. I don't think they will play to the best of their ability, and I think A&M will be able to match their level of play just because of what's on the line for them and what that atmosphere is like in a night game in College Station.
I'll tell you, I'm Joe, you talked about how you grew up in OU territory and that rivalry's always meant more to you. I got a sister that went to A&M. I grew up in South Central Texas, outside of San Antonio. Everyone that does not go to Texas goes to A&M if they are able to get in, right? And so the amount of people that I know that I like and dislike that go to A&M, this rivalry, this game means so much more to me than any OU game we've played. To be
Mm.
completely honest, as much as that rivalry means, this game with a chance to go to the SEC championship means more than any game that I've ever watched as a Texas fan, reporter, whatever, right? And Quinn Ewers last week for the first quarter looked like he was back to that Heisman form Quinn Ewers, stepping up in the pocket, delivering throws on time, maneuvering around, finding Gunnar Helm in the back of the end zone early, and then that deep shot to Gunnar Helm late after he had hurt his ankle. After that, he did not look like the same quarterback. He could not move. He could not throw. He couldn't handle the ball. He couldn't get around in the pocket. And then Texas imploded, in my opinion, because of that. Obviously, you had the 15 play drive with all runs that was beautiful to watch if you're a ground and pound football fan. That's not going to work against this front seven of Texas A&M. And so with Quinn Ewers coming in likely hobbled, I think that's a huge concern for Texas, and I think that plays very well into what A&M is going to try and do, and that's going to be rush the passer. Because under pressure, when Quinn can't step up in the pocket, he is not the same guy that we saw last year towards the end of the season, early this year against Michigan. He is much more of that guy we saw against Georgia. My second concern is the pre-snap penalties and the offensive line. Because early this season, this offensive line was struggling to stay composed, especially in big road environments, even at home. I mean, we saw it against Michigan, a few pre-snap penalties early. I think this is going to be that Michigan environment on steroids. And so that worries me as well. Is that offensive line going to be ready for that environment? Are they going to be able to hear the cadence, hear the snaps? What's the preparation going into this week's game around the offensive line? And then my last concern is ball security. I mean, against Kentucky this past weekend, Jaden Blue fumbled and lost the ball. And then the very next time Texas got on the field, Jarrett Gibson fumbled it out of bounds. And then Quinn Ewers had the fumble, tip, interception, whatever you want to call it. And then we got a stop, and Silas Bolden couldn't contain a punt. He was able to fall on it, but he didn't catch the ball. And that ball security has been an issue all season long, and I think it could play a big part in this game as well. I mean, Texas got lucky against Oklahoma to fall on a ball in the end zone after a fumble. So it's been rough from a ball security standpoint. So those are my big concerns. Now,
Saw someone's. Oh, sorry. Go. I thought you. Go ahead.
what Texas has to be optimistic about is Quinn did look fantastic for that first half. That running game really took on strong in the fourth quarter, and I think they can continue some of that against A&M. I don't think they're going to be able to dominate. And then the Texas defense, I think, is really, really going to be the strong suit. And I think they have a chance to dominate Marcel Reed if he's the one playing. Um, he's not a big guy. He's not the strongest guy. And I think Anthony Hill and Trey Moore and Colin Simmons and Alfred Collins beating up on him a little bit is going to take a toll late in the game. And so when you combine that with the way the Texas secondary has been playing, I think the Texas defense could really help Texas end up with a dominant score over A&M. I just am super worried about that offense right now.
And it's been the story for this Texas team all season long, leaning on the defense. Who would have thought that when hiring Steve Sarkisian, there'd be a year where you're leaning more on the defense than the offense? And we've seen this defense steadily improve every year under Pete Kwiatkowski, who, by the way, is a Royals Award finalist, best assistant coach in the nation. I think he should win it. I think he's the overwhelming favorite to win it as it stands right now. I'd be shocked if his award to lose, as Evan Veith was saying on his Twitter. But when I look at this defense, I sit here, and this is the reason why I'm more confident that this Texas team won't be too rattled, is because I don't know what the answer for the A&M offense is going to be against this defense. So far, we've seen really in this past few weeks of action that this offense or defense really could have some struggles with the rush. Um, I guess I should say with defensive rushes, but they know how to finish tackles in space. And I think that going against the run, that A&M will try to exploit it every now and then and try to see what they can do against this front seven. I do think that Texas knows how to get into those third and long possessions, and they know how to like make sure that they don't let their opposition move the chains. So with that being said, I do think this defense can have a good day where they can at least keep A&M below 23 points in Kyle Field. And if that's the case, I think that's a win for the defense. Now, for the offense, like you were saying, I don't know what to expect. That's the wild card. And I think that's what's a little bit scary and frightening if you're a Texas fan, is that this A&M defense is very up and down. We've seen this team have, a 21-0 deficit in Jordan Hare Stadium and then turn around, and build upon a few stops. We've seen them have a bad start in South Carolina, Willie Bryce Stadium, and then all of a sudden build upon another drive and start to get a little bit hot, and then surrender a lead in the very late stages of the third and fourth quarters. So this is a defense in A&M that is up and down. They can defend the run very well at times. Overall in the season, they're not amazing with it, but they're still top of the SEC against the run. So I do think that even with that bad game against the run they had in South Carolina, they're a fine team against the run. And if you're Texas and you have that big 15-play drive that lasted what seemed like hours, you're in a good position to exploit this defense, even if Quinn Ewers is banged up a little bit.
I would say this is the first time, not the first time, but this is the first time in a long time I've seen Texas defense play so disciplined. And I'll include last year too, but there are so many studs on this team individually that could stand out as some of the best players at their position in all of college football. I mean, aside from Jahdae Barron and Anthony Hill, you have Colin Simmons and Trey Moore just absolutely killing it. And Andrew Makuba. And I know you had Byron Murphy and Sweat last year, but like as a whole unit, this is the best I've ever seen Texas's defense play. And I don't think that they're going to go into College Station and struggle at all. I think Texas's struggles will arise from the offense in terms of how well will they be able to play in the third quarter. I mean, I still think this whole entire season, I think Texas is, even though they lost the game, Texas's best third quarter is probably the Georgia game when they scored 2 touchdowns. I mean, there's been a lot of scoreless 0 to 3 point third quarters that Texas has been responsible for. So I think the defense, if they walk in, they can set the tone early for the offense. It's a matter of, okay, the defense is putting the offense in a right position to win this game as an offense. And as Quinn Ewers, how are we going to respond? As Jane Blue, how are we going to make the right runs and hold on to the football? And how are we going to limit our mental mistakes, our mental errors that are costing us so much and that have been costing us so much the past few games now? I mean, I think if you limit those mental mistakes and you actually find a way to be efficient, to be productive in the third quarter offensively, Texas will be good to go. The defense, I think the defense is going to do its thing no matter what. They're the best defense in all of college football, or if not one of them. and they set their offense up for success. It's all going to be how will the offense respond.
I'll say this too. I think it is perfect for Texas that this game comes at the last week of the season. Thanksgiving break, students are gone. A lot of reporters are not, you know, really trying to dig in on Texas right now and figure out what's going on with Quinn. I think there's a chance we see Arch Manning play in this game over Quinn Ewers because I don't think Quinn is necessarily too hurt to play. But I think if A&M prepares for Quinn Ewers and they run into Arch Manning, I think that's going to be a problem for them because Arch Manning can move around in that pocket and he can make some of those deep throws. So I don't think it's a high likelihood, but I definitely think that that possibility is out there and it's higher than it has been in weeks past with this Quinn injury that we don't really know all that much about. How bad is his ankle? What is it looking like now? I didn't see a whole lot of questions yesterday in media availability about Quinn's ankle. I don't think Quinn talked to the media. So we have no idea really how healthy he's going to be going into this game. And I think Arch could step out on that field.
And I don't know how relevant this is, by the way, but Texas, believe it or not, has a winning record at Kyle Field. Granted, last time they played in 2011, there were about 12,000 less seats. But I think that is a big thing to note. Like, this is not a house of horrors for Texas, albeit it's known to be one of the most, crazy places in the college football game today. I don't know, like if I'm convinced that Texas is going to be really shaken. I mean, they've played in the big house before, and Goose, you already said this game is going to be like the big house on steroids. I don't know if it will be. I mean, they're pumping in speakers, but it's not going to be during the plays. You're not allowed to do it during the plays, so you're going to be relying just basically on an entire fan base the entire game, playing Mo Bamba on every third down.
Do
I
we
don't know.
do we really think they're not going to be playing those speakers up until a little bit
They
past?
they definitely will. They probably will. We'll
Mo
see.
Bamba is a Texas Longhorn song, though. I mean, the person it's about played basketball at the University of Texas.
Yeah.
There's
I don't
some
understand. I don't
irony
understand why they
there.
do it there. I really don't understand. I know it's a nice hype song, but if you're trying to be not to be little brother, I would think that you'd probably not try to play a song named after a Texas Longhorn. So it is
Hey,
what it is. But
we
this is
we
gonna
all
be a
know
great game.
we all know they've never had a song made about any one of their athletes. So I'm not too worried about it. Maybe Johnny Manziel, but
Name drop. Name drop. Name drop versus song title.
lastly, what are our score predictions, fellas?
Oof.
Joe,
You
starting
can
us
take
off.
it. Oh, okay. All right. I guess I'll do it.
Or if
Uh,
I can, and then you
up to you.
say,
Up to you. I don't care. I don't care.
let me, okay. I have the defense playing well, and I know that I've been a little skeptical about Texas's offense in this episode today, but for some reason, whether it's this game or a college football playoff game or the SEC championship, I see Quinn Ewers just bursting out of his shell and releasing a deep ball that connects, reminiscent to Justin Fields' deep ball against Clemson in the college football playoffs a few years ago. I don't know when it's going to happen, but I
Oh,
think
oh yeah. That's a
it's
replayed highlight forever. Him to Olave
him to
in
Olave.
the
And
in
I
the
feel
Sugar
like
Bowl.
with all that's going on in his life, or all that's going on around him right now, I think it's bound to happen. He's about to break out of that shell. But that could happen this game. And I think Quinn steps up. My score prediction is going to be 38, no, excuse me, 28 to 23.
It's a fair prediction. I think, dude, just looking at this team, specifically the defense throughout this whole season, it's hard for me to believe they do all this, put up all these numbers just to lay an egg in Kyle Field. And we've seen the only time they've given up a crazy amount of points has been when Ewers in this offense can't protect the ball. This team knows how to generate turnovers. They know how to take the ball away. And with that being said, I do think that they can hold this team to 23 and under. I say they win 30 to 23 in Kyle Field, in College Station, the return of the best rivalry in Texas, in-state rivalry in Texas. I think that they can beat the A&M Aggies 30 to 23 in the return of this great game.
I like all those score predictions. I think Texas's defense will cause more turnovers than what the offense gives away. Um, I believe that it's going to be close until about the 6 or 7 minute mark in the fourth quarter. I think Texas is going to put together a scoring drive um, to really ice it, and I'm going to go with 31-19. I think at some point A&M tries to go for two when it's like uh 24 to 13. They try and go for two, make it a 3 point game. They don't get it. Texas ends up putting that game away. Something like that. That's kind of how I envision the game going. But I don't think it's going to be just a master class from the offense. I think a lot of the scores are going to be from turnovers generated in plus territory, maybe a long ball here or there, but I don't see it happening all that often. So I got to go 31-19.
I got a big question here. I'm anxious to hear what y'all say. Do we think Burt Auburn is going to have a high leverage, high pressure kick? Do we think it's happening?
No, no.
No.
I don't think it's gonna come down to that. If it does, I don't even want to speak about that.
If it does, I'm not
Y'all know it's
commenting.
happening, bro. It's gonna come. Come
It's gonna
on.
happen at some point. It's
It's
gonna
gonna be
happen at some point.
overtime or it's gonna be a last second field goal by either team.
And look, Randy Bond, A&M's kicker, had a little bit of a shaky game. Not crazy shaky. He missed one field goal in
But he
Auburn, but
drilled it.
that
He
ended up
drilled
being a
it.
So did
big one.
Bert.
Ended up being a big one. And Burt Auburn, he can be very shaky as well. And I think a lot of people don't really get on his tail much because
He
there
hasn't
haven't been
had
many
to.
times. Yeah, I mean, this offense knows how to either just go for fourth down and just not get it, or just flat out cash in and score a touchdown. So he hasn't had many like kicks between 40 and 50 where they need this guy to knock down a field goal.
And man,
And I feel like,
when he
yeah,
How
does, they
many
are
A&M
shaky.
kickers
yeah.
have had the first name Randy and the last initial starting with a B? Randy Bond, Randy Bullock. I mean,
Randy,
I think that's it,
I can't
but
think of any.
I think
I
that's
can't
it.
think of. I thought you were gonna go. I thought you were gonna carry that right there, Robert. I don't know.
but
I can't think of many.
and just in case it wasn't clear, I have Texas winning. I said 28-23, but I don't know if I made it clear who I had winning.
It's gonna be a close one. I really do think it'll be a touchdown game. Wouldn't mind a blowout, but we don't know what's gonna happen. It's a road game, man. And like I was saying, bro, like
First
there's
game in
no
over a
way
decade. There
if
could be
there was any game that A&M were to show up for, and you can count on them to be there and not have a slow start, is this game right here. We all know it's coming.
we
You
all
just got to
talk
find a way to
about
take the crowd out the game.
This is no cakewalk for the Longhorns here.
we all talk about how weird stuff happens in Jordan Hare and rivalry weeks, something weird is bound to happen. First game in over a decade, I could see something like a Hail Mary type ending, a 56-yard kick type ending. Like
Oh,
I don't think it happens that way, just the way that Texas and A&M are both constructed, but I do think that there could absolutely be some scary, weird ending in the future.
It's only Tuesday, man. Come on
only
now.
Just bring me
Tuesday. We
Saturday.
haven't even
Just
ate for
come on.
Thanksgiving yet.
I don't even need Thanksgiving. Nobody
And then
needs to watch Tommy DeVito versus Cooper Rush, man.
and then right when A&M scored a touchdown, it'd be like, oh my God, why can't I just go back to when this game didn't start?
uh, with
Oh
that
no.
being said, let's get into some other rivalry matchups. What, in y'all's opinion, is the best rivalry in all of college football before we go to our sicko matchup of the week?
The best in all of college football? Hmm. I mean, I'm a big believer that it's Oklahoma, Texas. I mean, that's all I knew growing up. I mean, it literally is all I knew. I just Oklahoma fans always in my ear as a Texas fan, always saying they own us, watching Baker Mayfield and CeeDee Lamb and
The
Kyler
Dark
Murray.
Ages.
Yeah, the dark ages pretty
I
much. But
mean,
that game, it's just a spectacle, and you see it every single time in Dallas. It is anybody's ball game. Doesn't matter if one team is ranked, way more than the other. That first quarter, second quarter is going to be magical. And then every now and then they'll pull away really in that fourth quarter or third quarter, late third quarter. But I think that rivalry is the best just because it's in Dallas, it's neutral field, not too far from each other's homes. And I do think that with both teams having a very even record kind of in the game, even though Texas still leads, it's just anybody's ball game. I've seen the most wacky things happen, some spectacular endings, some all-time players playing in it. It literally has it all. So I would go with Oklahoma, Texas still, even though it hasn't been that great game-wise the past two of 3 years.
Joe, I was gonna say Oklahoma, Texas too, just because of the whole they played at a neutral site location in Dallas. They played at the state fair with all the fried foods, and they play where they separate the two fan bases by a horseshoe. Each side has their own 50 yards, and everyone changes their chants for that game. I would say that, but for the sake of this conversation, I'll go with another one. I think I would be shunned if I didn't say the game, Michigan and Ohio State. I've never really been a huge Big Ten fan. I mean, I'm a fan, like I like the teams and everything, but I've never been that passionate, that passionate towards their fan base because like I don't live in that geographical area. We're Joe, you and I are from Texas. We don't really understand the games as much as they do. But I would say the game just because of, you know, the deep level of hatred those two fan bases show towards each other, not even being able to say their opponents' names the week of the game, and just all the implications that are usually in play when those teams come together and face off. I got to go with Michigan and Ohio State.
You know, I I agree with both of those answers, but the Auburn Bowl, or not the Auburn Bowl, the
Whoa.
Iron Bowl, the Iron Bowl between Auburn and Alabama, man. I used to be such a hater growing up because it felt like Nick Saban every year was just going to dominate Auburn. But as of late, that game, there's something special about it. Every single year when those two teams match up, does not matter who is ranked higher than who, what team is expected to dominate. Something in that game is magical. Like it just draws those two scores to be tight. Like obviously we had the miracle last year from Milrow to Isaiah Bond in the corner of the end zone. The Bryce Young late minute or late game drive a couple years ago to steal the game from Auburn. I mean, there's just something about that game that's different than every other game, I feel like. And although Auburn has not had the season they want, with the win against A&M this past week, they come in with some momentum. Alabama getting stomped by OU. I think we're in for a doozy in that one.
And I think a big thing to note, I saw it on WTF stats, if I should say it like that. But Auburn has never lost to Alabama outside of Tuscaloosa. Now, oh, outside of where do they play? Auburn, of course. But they never lost to Alabama and Tuscaloosa. And the key context is that that game used to be played in Birmingham in a neutral site as well. And they didn't start making it a home and home thing until I believe the late 90s, early 2000s. And up to that point where Nick Saban arrived, they beat Alabama and Tuscaloosa every single time. And I do feel like the game is much better when it's played in Auburn and Jordan Hare for some reason. I don't really like it when it's in Tuscaloosa, but
Agreed.
it usually is a very great game. And I usually love watching that. I'll tell you what game I will hate on, and I will never respect it, is Florida and Georgia. I'm never respecting that rivalry game, ever. I will
That
be
right, yeah.
sleeping. I'll be sleeping every single time those guys face off. It was good in the first two quarters, but once Lagway got hurt this past year, it was pretty much just a
I feel
wash.
like
I
we
mean,
haven't had a good game between those two in so long.
yeah.
All
I
right.
didn't know, Joe, that Auburn had never lost to Alabama.
And then it said the Nick Saban era. So it said they never lost to Alabama in Tuscaloosa in the Nick Saban era. And so there's a few games before he arrived
What
where
about 2018?
did they beat him at
Or
Tuscaloosa?
or yeah, Auburn lost to Alabama in Tuscaloosa in
I is
2018.
the stat saying without Nick Saban they've never lost to Auburn and Tuscaloosa?
Oh wait, what did I say it wrong?
I think you might have said it wrong, but
Yeah, I think they haven't lost to Alabama at Tuscaloosa without Nick Saban.
Got
I think
it.
I said it wrong. My bad.
No, you're good.
But yeah, like it's just funny to think that was once a neutral site game in Birmingham. They used to play um at Legion Field, I believe it was called. And they used to play that game in Birmingham. And then like in the late 90s, they just decided to move it to a home and home series where they just faced off and switched sides pretty much every now and then. So that'll be an interesting game to watch because now with Alabama showing that they couldn't even get past Oklahoma, same man's ball game now, right? And Auburn putting up their best offensive showing really in the SEC this year so far against A&M. Hugh Freeze trying to fight for his job, even though he's probably gonna get fired. But you can say he's fighting for his job, I guess, for an extra storyline.
you could for sure. Y'all got any sicko matchups this week? Any sicko rivalry games? I know I have one.
Hmm.
I'm looking at the slate right now, trying to figure this out.
Does it have to be rivalry?
It doesn't have to be a rivalry game, but a game this week that you're looking forward to.
I'm really looking forward to South Carolina taking on Clemson this weekend. It's in Death Valley. South Carolina's 18 with Lenore Sellers. We're definitely seeing his come up happen right now. Clemson still with a chance to go to the ACC championship, but here we
Yep.
are, non-conference rivalry still being played amidst all this realignment at the very end of the season. It's one of my favorites, like when Florida State and Florida play, or when Louisville and Kentucky always play. But here is South Carolina taking on longtime rival Clemson for a chance, a slim, slim chance at the playoffs in Clemson, a chance at going to the ACC championship. I'll have my eyes on this one at 11 a.m. on Saturday.
No, I mean, I look at this slate, uh, maybe like I would say Nebraska and Iowa.
Okay.
Neither one is ranked, but obviously going to Midwestern teams, that's a big matchup between the Cornhuskers and the Hawkeyes. Of course, Nebraska coming off their best offensive showing so far in the past few weeks. Dana Holgerson, who is the OC who came in throughout the season, of course, the former coach of West Virginia, also of Houston. And this offense is rolling, and it's not exactly the season Matt Rule was envisioning with Dylan Raiola, or I guess you could say the Mahomes cosplayer that people like to make fun of him for. But they've had an okay season, not what I was expecting after they had a really nice start. I remember David Picorni, one of our members of Texas Student Television, former Texas X, saying that this team's going to roll into Ohio State undefeated and ahead of that big game, and they just fell short. They ran out of gas, it seemed like. So I think that going against a team in Iowa, rolling into Iowa that has not been as effective as they had been in these past few seasons on defense, that they could really find a way to make this a really good game and keep that win streak rolling in the end of the season.
That's a fun one for sure. My I gotta say, the woke mob going to Dallas to take on SMU has perked my interest. The Cal Golden Bears
Whoa.
taking on SMU, I think could be a really, really fun game. Fernando Mendoza, 98 yards with his boys to get bowl eligible, and now they have a chance to ruin SMU's season. I would not at all overlook that game if I'm SMU. I would definitely take that game seriously. But I think that could be a fun one. They played Miami close, 39-38. They played Pitt close, 17-15. They lost by one against NC State. And then, I mean, you look at their recent games, they beat up on Oregon State 44-7, a big win over Wake Forest, then a tough loss versus Syracuse. But Cal has played some good football this season and just come up in some really unlikely losses. Obviously, that Florida State loss you can look back on and say that's a really bad loss, but I would not at all overlook them if I'm SMU with a chance to stay in the playoff hunt.
Classic ACC matchup.
Classic.
Definitely what we drew up 5 years ago for the ACC.
Absolutely.
Classic, long time ACC matchup that we could have always predicted.
Historic rivals, the
Oh, man.
California Golden Bears.
We're hating
Yes,
right now.
pony up.
Any rivalries that we're gonna miss this weekend?
Yeah, I'll start us off. Bedlam, Oklahoma State and Oklahoma. We're gonna miss that one. And that was we just lost that as a product of realignment. But yeah.
I'm not gonna lie, I can't think of too many besides A&M and Texas historically. So I'm gonna have to defer this one to you, Goose.
Yeah, I was gonna say Bedlam as well. I feel like that's the big one that we're all missing. It sucks that we don't get that game anymore. I feel like that one always is chaotic, always has a amazing environment. It really sucks that we're not gonna get that game either.
I'd like to maybe name a few teams that played this season already, but like I think I'm almost pretty sure they've always played on this last weekend and they're not. Um, Kansas State, Iowa State. Um, I think Stanford and Cal usually always played in the second to last week of the season, so maybe this is not this is this is like any other year that they're not playing. But yeah, those two. And this is my really random one, but I remember just me always trying to be an encyclopedia of college football. I'm gonna go into the MAC here. Okay. I'm gonna pull out one from the MAC. I have to say this because we're talking about rivalries that aren't being played this week. Uh, Miami of Ohio and Ohio University not playing the Battle
Okay.
of the Bricks.
Okay. Why are they not playing?
They played earlier this season, and I think
Oh,
they're in the MAC, right? Yeah, the MAC.
what was the point of them moving their date?
I don't know why they moved their day, but they played earlier this season, and they're not playing this weekend.
Hmm.
Wow, man. The whole landscape is just getting
Action.
changed before
We'll
our
miss
eyes,
you.
man. Very sad, very sad. Bittersweet in a way. I shouldn't say it's completely sad because there's some good things coming from it. I don't want to act all, you know, glum about it because there are some good things about college football left. It's still pure in a way, and I was a big hater of the 12-team playoff when it first was announced to be the new playoff system because I thought I was just going to lose like the important sense of games. Like guys were not going to care, but you saw Georgia and Alabama; they still cared
Oh,
in that game early in the season.
absolutely.
And even teams are still trying to claw into it the last moment here with A&M and Texas just coming up. So it's still a big, very big season, even with the 12-team playoff being implemented.
I
I think one of
agree.
the great teams with the 12-team playoff is this home field first round. And that's because, you could be sitting down in front of your TV and you could basically hear the announcer. I'll use Brett Musburger's saying here, even though he's not commentating anymore, but you're looking live from, and then blank space, input any single college town you can think of. You're looking live from South Bend, Indiana in the first round of the college football playoffs, or you're looking live from Happy Valley. Do any town for that. And that could even arrange to you're looking live from Allegiant Stadium where UNLV is hosting a first round college football playoff game. It's true. It's
I
true.
mean, this is a little mini question. I feel like I shouldn't have asked this so late because we're going really long with this podcast, but this is a really big question. Are we going to get to the point where guys are just going to sit and rest these games? I feel like this has been talked about like a little bit, but not as much as I like thought it would be. Because the guys have been dipping in some of these bowl games that are meaningless. But like, if it's a big time first round prospect who is say going to be a top 10 pick, is he for sure a lock? Going to always play this game? Say if they were an eighth seed or a ninth seed?
Ooh,
Or because if he was a top four seed, like I would expect him to play. If it was the quarterback, receiver, I get
yeah.
that. But if it's like, I don't know, an offensive tackle or something that doesn't necessarily need to play these games and have, a lot of wear and tear in his body and put himself on the line for the team. Does he
I don't know if
play
coaches would
these?
love that.
Well, for sure, they already hate some of it, but it's a business decision for some of these guys. And we've seen it already with some of them dip in these bowl games, like the Holiday Bowl or something, or not
I always
necessarily in New Year.
I always say if you're not a quarterback or um but yeah, if you're not a quarterback and you're a top prospect and you feel like you could be putting your health in danger and your ability to play at the next level in danger, don't play. That's how I've always looked at it. Like from just a perspective of keeping yourself healthy and uh making sure that you have the best chance to be the best player at the next level and make as much money as possible, don't play.
Fair.
With that being said, though, it's Thanksgiving week, y'all. Enjoy the food, enjoy the family, enjoy the festivities, and a little bit of football. Hopefully, we get a good game. Maybe the Bears collapse again, and we can all laugh at them this Thursday. Um, but with that being
Cowboys 10 to
said,
7. I don't know. No, we know that's not happening.
with that being said, let's well, that'll wrap it up here for the 40 Acres Football Podcast. Obviously, tune into our other podcasts. We have a ton going on this semester. And you know, A&M versus Texas. We'll have a huge recap and talk some more football next week. So thanks for joining us. For Justin Goosman, Robert Gonsoulin, Joe Duffey. We'll see you next week.